Welcome to our deep dive, all about learning English with technology. And you've really sent us a fascinating mix of articles and notes here. You've got everything from, the classic online courses to some really creative stuff, uses of social media, even gaming.
Yeah, looks like someone's ready to level up their English.
You've definitely been doing your research. It looks like you've already tried some of the big names like Duolingo and Babbel.
Great for building that foundation, get the basics down.
But your notes tell me you're hungry for more than that.
Right.
You want to go beyond flashcards and actually use the language. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And that's where things get really exciting.
So you highlighted some platforms for virtual language exchange.
Yeah, like HelloTalk and Tandem.
What is it about this approach that makes it so special?
Well, the cool thing about virtual language exchange is it uses this idea of reciprocal learning. So you're not just taking information in, you're actually helping someone else learn your native language.
So it's like a two-way street.
Exactly. You get real-world conversation practice, and when you teach something, you learn it even better yourself.
That makes sense.
And beyond the language itself, you get to connect with people from all over the world, different cultures, new perspectives, and even make some friends.
I remember when I was learning Spanish, I was so focused on the grammar and textbook exercises. I kind of missed the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Having those real conversations, even if they were a little rough around the edges, it really helped me build my confidence.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Feeling connected to the culture behind the language, it really helps you stay motivated. And speaking of staying engaged, you're a big podcast fan.
Oh, huge. I mean, I've lost track of how many true crime podcasts I've listened to.
And now with all these great English language podcasts out there.
Yeah, I'm thinking this could be another secret weapon for improving my English.
Yeah. Absolutely. Podcasts are like a gold mine for language learners, especially if you pick topics you already love. History, science, comedy, whatever you're into. If you're interested in the content, you'll be way more motivated to listen and learn.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like when you're starting a fitness routine, if you pick something you actually enjoy doing, you're more likely to stick with it.
Exactly.
But there are so many podcasts out there. Any tips for choosing ones that are good for language learning?
Well, when it comes to language learning, not all podcasts are created equal. Look for ones that offer transcripts or that have a slower speaking pace. Some even focus specifically on vocabulary or grammar.
Oh, wow.
Some podcasts even have built-in exercises and quizzes so you can test yourself as you go.
So it's like having a language tutor right in your earbuds.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to start with podcasts that are made for learners, There are tons of great podcasts out there designed specifically for people learning English. Clear explanations of grammar, vocabulary, all that good stuff.
It's so easy to get caught up trying to keep up with native level content.
Yeah.
And then end up feeling lost and discouraged.
Right. Starting with material made for learners can be a much better approach.
Definitely something to keep in mind.
It's all about finding that sweet spot between challenging yourself and actually understanding what you're listening to. You want to push yourself, but you also want to enjoy the process. Speaking of immersing yourself in spoken English, have you considered audiobooks at all?
Audiobooks.
Yeah.
Now that you mention it, I do remember highlighting a few articles about them in my notes.
Yeah.
I love the idea of getting lost in a good story and leveling up my English at the same time.
It's a win-win. And just like with podcasts, the key is to choose books that you're actually interested in. Think about your favorite genres, mysteries, sci-fi, biographies, whatever keeps you turning the pages. Imagine getting so absorbed in the story that you almost forget you're even learning English.
Yeah, curling up with a cup of tea, completely immersed in an English thriller that sounds way more enjoyable than those dry textbook dialogues.
Exactly, and it takes the pressure off. And here's another interesting thing. Research has shown that listening to audiobooks can actually improve your reading comprehension as well.
Really?
Yeah, when you listen to a good narrator, you're picking up all these subtle things about pronunciation, intonation pacing, and all of that can actually make you a better reader.
That's fascinating. I have noticed that my reading has gotten smoother since I started listening to more podcasts and audiobooks.
It's like this ripple effect. The more you hear the language, the more fluent you'll become in all aspects of English.
That makes a lot of sense. So we've talked about spoken English quite a bit.
Yeah.
But I also remember flagging some tools for improving my writing in my notes. To be honest, I'm a bit intimidated by writing in English. It feels a lot more formal than just chatting.
I get that. Writing can definitely feel more daunting. But it's an important skill to master. And the good news is there are tons of tools out there that can make it less intimidating and even fun. Remember those blogging platforms you mentioned?
Yeah. I've always been curious about blogging, but never really took the plunge. I think I was afraid to put my writing out there for the world to see, especially since I'm still learning.
It's understandable to be a little hesitant. But here's the thing. Blogging platforms like WordPress and Medium, they give you a chance to get feedback on your writing from real people,
Yeah.
not just some grammar checking algorithm. Imagine sharing your thoughts and experiences with a global audience people who can give you insights, suggestions, maybe even some constructive criticism.
Okay, I'm starting to see the appeal. It's like having a built-in writing group.
Exactly. And, the cool thing is these platforms cater to all sorts of writing styles. You could blog about your hobbies, share personal essays, write short stories, even poetry. The sky's the limit.
I love that. A chance to be creative, express myself, connect with people, and practice my writing all at the same time.
Speaking of writing, have you ever thought about checking out online debate platforms?
Online debates. That's a new one. What's so great about arguing with strangers on the internet?
Well, it's not really about arguing, but more about, having structured discussions and defending your point of view in English. Platforms like debate.org, they can actually be a really good way to practice expressing yourself clearly and persuasively.
So it's like a virtual debate club.
Exactly. You can sharpen your arguments, expand your vocabulary all in English.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Debates, they really make you think critically, don't they?
They do. You have to research different perspectives and then explain your ideas in a clear and organized way. And the emotional part of it, the passion of a debate, it can actually make the learning process a lot more fun.
That's true. I definitely learn best when I'm emotionally invested in the material. So we've covered speaking, listening, and writing, but what about vocabulary? I feel like I'm constantly running into words I don't know.
Yeah, vocabulary, it's a lifelong challenge for any language learner. But technology offers a lot of help in that department. What do you normally do when you come across a word you don't know?
Honestly, I usually just whip out my phone and look it up on Google Translate or Merriam-Webster. Quick and convenient, but sometimes I feel like I'm not really learning the word, you know,
Yeah.
just memorizing it for a minute.
Right. It's easy to fall into that trap of passive learning with digital dictionaries. But here's the thing. Don't just look up the definition and move on. Actually engage with the word.
What do you mean?
Say it out loud, write it down in a sentence, use it in a conversation. The more you interact with it, the more likely you are to remember it.
I've never really thought about saying the words out loud before. Seems so simple, but I bet it makes a difference.
It does. And another good strategy is flashcards. You know, the old school ones, or you can use apps like Anki or Quizlet. Testing yourself over and over really helps reinforce those connections in your brain.
Flashcards. It takes me back to my school days. A classic for a reason, I guess.
Exactly. They work. And speaking of classic techniques, let's not forget good old-fashioned reading. I know we've been focusing on technology, but reading English books, articles, websites, it can really help you expand your vocabulary.
Absolutely. I love reading, and it's definitely helped me learn English. But sometimes I feel overwhelmed by all the new words. Any tips for dealing with challenging texts?
It's about finding the right level. Don't be afraid to start with simpler texts, like graded readers or young adult novels. Then as you get better, you can gradually work your way up to more complex stuff. And remember, it's okay to look up words you don't know.
In fact, it's encouraged.
Exactly. The more you see new words in context, the faster your vocabulary will grow.
I've definitely noticed that when I look up a word while I'm reading, it sticks with me better than just trying to memorize it from a list.
It's all about context. And technology can actually help us create those contextualized learning experiences. For example, there are tools like Readlang that let you read texts online and instantly translate any word you don't know. You can even make your own vocabulary lists and flashcards right from the text you're reading.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm always switching between tabs, trying to look up words. Having it all in one place would be amazing.
It's all about making the learning process as smooth and enjoyable as possible. The easier it is, the more likely you are to keep going.
I am all about making things easier. So we've talked about expanding our vocabulary through reading. But what about pronunciation? I know my accent can be a bit thick sometimes, and I would love to work on sounding more natural and confident when I speak English.
Pronunciation is so important, and it's often overlooked. Luckily, technology has come up with some really innovative tools to help us refine our accents and feel more confident speaking English. Have you ever tried using speech recognition software to practice your pronunciation, like Elsa Speak or even Google Assistant?
Speech recognition software. I've used those for things like sending texts and setting reminders, but never for pronunciation practice. How does that even work?
It's pretty cool. These tools, they can analyze your pronunciation in real time and give you feedback on things like your intonation, your stress, even individual sounds. It's like having a virtual pronunciation coach right there in your pocket.
So I could practice those tricky vowel sounds I always mess up and actually get feedback on whether I'm saying them correctly.
That's awesome, especially for someone like me who learns best by doing.
Exactly. And you could practice anytime, anywhere. Waiting for the bus, standing in line at the grocery store. All those little moments become chances to improve your pronunciation.
I love that, turning downtime into opportunities for growth.
It's all about finding ways to fit language learning into your life in a way that feels natural and manageable. Speaking of finding ways to make things easier, I know you're interested in exploring some of those less obvious but incredibly effective techniques for immersion, like changing your phone and computer settings to English.
Yeah, I've heard about that, and I'm curious what kind of impact it can have. It seems like a small change, but I bet it makes a big difference in how much you're exposed to the language.
You know what's really cool about that approach is it turns your everyday digital life into a chance to passively learn English. You're constantly seeing English menus, notifications, app interfaces without even realizing it. So it's like creating this little mini English-speaking world right on my phone and computer.
Exactly. And you can take it even further by turning on English subtitles for videos, even ones you've already seen.
Oh, like my favorite shows and movies.
Exactly. You'd be surprised how many new words and phrases you pick up, even from something you already know.
That's a great idea. I always watch movies with subtitles anyway, even in my native language. I like catching every detail.
And now you can use it to boost your English comprehension, too.
Why not? It's a great way to train your ear and your eye at the same time. And if I'm feeling really adventurous, maybe I could even change the voice assistant language on my phone to English.
Oh, wow. Talking to your phone in English.
Now that's a challenge.
It's a great way to practice speaking in a safe space. No pressure, no fear of judgment. And the more you use your devices in English, the more natural it will become.
I'm convinced I'm changing all my settings tonight. But I have to admit, I'm still a bit nervous about having actual conversations with native English speakers. It's one thing to practice with an app or a voice assistant, but it's another thing entirely to have a real conversation with all its nuances and complexities.
I understand that feeling completely. It's natural to feel a little apprehensive about stepping outside your comfort zone.
Hmm.
But remember those virtual language exchange apps we talked about? They can actually be a great way to bridge that gap and build your confidence for real-life conversations.
That's a good point. I could start by typing messages and then gradually move up to voice calls or even video chats as I feel more comfortable.
Exactly. It's like easing yourself into the world of spoken English with the support of a friendly language partner.
And everyone makes mistakes when they're learning a new language, right?
Of course, the key is to not let the fear of making mistakes hold you back. Just embrace those mistakes as opportunities to learn and grow.
That is so important.
Yeah.
I tend to be a bit of a perfectionist,
Mhm.
and I get discouraged when I mess up.
It's all part of the process. And who knows, you might even end up with some funny stories to tell about your language mishaps along the way.
So we've really explored a ton of different tech tools and techniques for learning English. It's amazing how technology can give us so much control over our learning journey and help us achieve our goals in a way that's personalized, engaging, even fun.
It's a great time to be a language learner, that's for sure. So many amazing resources out there. The possibilities are endless.
Before we wrap up, I do want to acknowledge that it can be a little overwhelming to figure out where to even begin with all these different options. What advice would you give to our listeners who are feeling a bit lost?
The most important thing is to remember that you don't have to use every single tool or technique out there. It's about finding what works for you, what fits your learning style and your goals, and what you actually enjoy doing. Start small, experiment. Don't be afraid to change things up as you go.
That is great advice. It's about making your language learning journey your own, something that feels authentic and that you can stick with.
Absolutely. And remember, learning a language, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Enjoy the journey, embrace the challenges, and celebrate every victory along the way.
Beautifully said. And on that inspiring note, I think it's time for us to say goodbye for now. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into learning English with technology. We hope you've learned some valuable insights and discovered some new tools and strategies to help you on your language learning adventure.
Of all the tools and techniques we talked about today, which one are you most curious about? What's the one thing you're going to try out tonight? Remember, the first step is often the hardest, but it's also the most rewarding.
Go for it. Well, there you have it, folks, a deep dive into the world of learning English with technology. We hope you found it as inspiring as we did. Remember, the power to learn a new language is right there at your fingertips. Now go out there and conquer English.
It's pretty amazing. These tools analyze your pronunciation in real time and provide feedback on things like intonation, stress, and individual sounds. It's like having a virtual pronunciation coach right in your pocket.
So I could practice those tricky vowel sounds that I always struggle with and get instant feedback on whether I'm hitting the mark. That sounds incredibly helpful, especially for someone like me who tends to learn best through hands-on practice.
Exactly. And the beauty of these apps is that you can practice anytime, anywhere. Imagine waiting for the bus or standing in line at the grocery store and using those spare moments to work on your pronunciation. It's all about weaving language learning into your daily life in a way that feels natural and manageable.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's like turning those little pockets of downtime into opportunities for growth. I'm all about maximizing efficiency, especially when it comes to something as important as language learning.
Speaking of efficiency, I know you're also interested in exploring those less obvious but incredibly effective techniques for immersion. You mentioned changing your phone and computer settings to English.
Yes, I've heard about this technique, and I'm curious to know what kind of impact it can have. It seems like a subtle change, but I can imagine it making a big difference in my overall exposure to the language.
What's fascinating about this approach is that it transforms your daily digital interactions into opportunities for passive language learning. You're constantly exposed to English menus, notifications, and app interfaces without even realizing it.
So it's like creating a mini English-speaking environment right in my own tech bubble. I love the idea of absorbing vocabulary and grammar naturally just by going about my usual digital routine.
Exactly. And here's where it gets even more interesting. You can take this immersion to the next level by enabling English subtitles on videos, even those you've already seen. Think about your favorite shows or movies and imagine rewatching them with English subtitles. You'll be surprised how many new words and expressions you pick up, even from content you're already familiar with.
Oh, that's a brilliant tip. I've always been a big fan of watching movies with subtitles, even in my native language. It helps me catch every detail and nuance of the dialogue. And now I'm thinking, why not use this strategy to boost my English comprehension as well?
It's a fantastic way to train your ear and eye to work together, creating a more immersive and memorable learning experience. And if you're feeling really adventurous, you can even change the voice assistant language on your devices to English.
Oh, wow, talking to my phone in English. Now that's a challenge I'm willing to accept. I can see how that would force me to think and respond in English more spontaneously.
It's a great way to practice speaking in a low-pressure environment without the fear of judgment. And the more you interact with your devices in English, the more natural and intuitive the language will become.
Okay, you've convinced me. I'm changing all my settings to English tonight. But I have to admit, I'm still a bit intimidated by the idea of having actual conversations with native English speakers. It's one thing to practice with an app or a voice assistant, but quite another to navigate a real-life conversation with all its nuances and complexities.
I completely understand that feeling. It's natural to feel apprehensive about stepping outside your comfort zone and putting your skills to the test. But remember those virtual language exchange apps we discussed earlier. They can be a fantastic stepping stone to build confidence and fluency in real-world conversations.
That's a good point. I could start by typing messages, then gradually progress to voice calls or even video chats as I feel more comfortable. It's like a gradual immersion into the world of spoken English with the support of a friendly language partner.
Exactly. And remember, everyone makes mistakes when they're learning a new language. The key is to embrace those mistakes as opportunities for growth and not let the fear of imperfection hold you back.
That's such an important reminder. I tend to be a bit of a perfectionist, and I can get easily discouraged when I make mistakes. But you're right, it's all part of the learning process. And who knows, maybe I'll even have some funny stories to tell about my language mishaps along the way.
Absolutely. Learning a language is an adventure filled with unexpected twists and turns, and those moments of imperfection often make the best stories.
So, we've explored a treasure trove of tech tools and techniques for learning English. It's incredible to see how technology can empower us to take control of our language learning journey and achieve our goals in a way that feels personalized, engaging, and even fun.
It's truly an exciting time to be a language learner. With so many innovative resources at our fingertips, the possibilities are endless.
Before we wrap up, I want to acknowledge that it can feel overwhelming at times to sort through all these options and figure out where to begin. What advice would you give to our listeners we're feeling a bit lost in the sea of language learning tech.
The most important thing is to remember that it's not about using every single tool or technique out there. It's about finding what resonates with you, what fits your learning style and goals, and what brings you joy in the process. Start small, experiment, and don't be afraid to adjust your approach as you go.
That's such valuable advice. It's all about creating a personalized language learning journey that feels authentic and sustainable.
Exactly. And remember, learning a language is a marathon, not a sprint. Enjoy the process, embrace the challenges, and celebrate every milestone along the way.
Beautifully said. And on that inspiring note, I think it's time for us to sign off. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of learning English with technology. We hope you've gained some valuable insights and discovered some new tools and strategies to help you on your language learning adventure.
Of all the tools and techniques we discussed today, which one sparked your curiosity the most? What's the one thing you're going to try out tonight? Remember, the first step is often the hardest, but it's also the most rewarding. Go for it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So there you have it, folks, a deep dive into the world of learning English with technology. We hope you found this journey as inspiring as we have. Remember, the power to unlock a new language is right at your fingertips. Now go out there and conquer English.
It's pretty amazing. These tools, they analyze your pronunciation in real time and give you feedback on things like intonation, stress, even individual sounds. It's like having a virtual pronunciation coach right in your pocket.
So I could practice those tricky vowel sounds I always mess up and actually get feedback on if I'm saying them right. That sounds awesome, especially for someone like me who learns best by doing.
Exactly. And the best part is you can practice anytime, anywhere. Waiting for the bus, standing in line at the grocery store, all those little moments become chances to work on your pronunciation.
Turning downtime into opportunities for growth. I love it.
It's all about finding ways to fit language learning into your life, in a way that feels natural and manageable. Speaking of which, I know you're also interested in those kind of less obvious but really effective techniques for immersion, like changing all your phone and computer settings to English.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that. And I'm really curious to know what kind of impact it can have. I mean, it seems like a small change, but I bet it makes a big difference in how much you're exposed to the language overall.
What's fascinating about it is it turns your everyday digital interactions into like these little passive language learning opportunities. You're constantly seeing English menus, notifications, app interfaces without even realizing it.
So it's like surrounding yourself with English, even when you're just using your phone or computer.
Exactly. And you can even take it a step further by turning on English subtitles for videos, even videos you've already seen.
Oh, like my favorite shows and movies.
Exactly. Think about it. You'd be surprised how many new words and phrases you pick up, even from something you already know.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
I love it. I always watch movies with subtitles anyway, even in my native language. Helps me catch all the details.
And now you can use that same strategy to help you learn English.
Makes sense. It's a great way to train your ear and your eye at the same time. And if I'm feeling extra adventurous, maybe I could even change the voice assistant language on my phone to English.
Wow, talking to your phone in English.
Wow, that's a challenge. I like it.
It's a great way to practice speaking, in a low-pressure environment. No one's judging you. And the more you interact with your devices in English, the easier it'll become.
You know what? I'm convinced. I'm changing all my settings to English tonight.
Mm-hmm.
But I gotta admit, I'm still a little nervous about actually talking to native English speakers.
Yeah.
Like having real conversations. I mean, it's one thing to practice with an app or a voice assistant, but real conversations are so much more unpredictable.
That's totally understandable. It's natural to feel a little intimidated by that. But remember those virtual language exchange apps we talked about?
Yeah.
They can actually be a really good bridge between practicing on your own and having those real-world conversations.
That's a good point. So I could start by just typing messages back and forth.
Yeah.
And then maybe work my way up to voice calls or even video chats, as I get more comfortable.
Exactly. It's like dipping your toes in the water before you jump in the deep end.
Yeah, I like that analogy a lot. And, it's okay to make mistakes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone does when they're learning a new language.
Exactly. The important thing is to not let the fear of messing up hold you back. Just see those mistakes as opportunities to learn and improve.
That's such a good reminder. I'm a little bit of a perfectionist,
Uh-huh.
and I get discouraged easily when I don't get things right.
It's all part of the process. And
Okay.
hey, you know what? Maybe you'll even have some funny stories to tell about your language mishaps down the road.
So we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? All sorts of tech tools and techniques for learning English. It's pretty amazing how technology can help us learn a new language in a way that feels fun and engaging and totally personalized.
It really is an exciting time to be a language learner with so many amazing resources available to us.
Before we wrap up, though, I do want to say that I know it can feel a bit overwhelming with all these different options, you
Mhm.
know? Like, where do you even start? What advice would you give to our listeners who are feeling a little lost in the world of language learning technology?
I think the most important thing to remember is that you don't have to try everything at once. It's all about finding what works best for you, what fits your learning style and your goals, and what you actually enjoy. Start with one or two things, experiment a little, and don't be afraid to adjust your approach as you go.
That's fantastic advice. It's about making language learning your own.
Absolutely. And remember, learning a new language, it's a journey, not a race. Enjoy the process, embrace the challenges, and celebrate all those little victories along the way.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of learning English with technology. We hope you found it helpful and inspiring.
Of all the tools and techniques we talked about today, which one sparked your curiosity the most? What will you try out tonight? Remember that first step? It's often the hardest one to take, but it's also the most rewarding.
So go for it. Well, there you have it, folks. A deep dive into learning English with technology. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Remember, you have the power to learn a new language right there in your hands. Now go out there and conquer English.